I know.
No.
Listen.
Everybody who buys the gear.
It goes
I love your dress. Is it a dress?
What's
It's
it?
a dress. I should have known.
It is.
I really love it. I love the color.
Thank you.
No, you
Not me. Not you.
Give me a thumbs up.
It was every day.
make sure.
It was worth it. I like it as a player.
Oh, yeah. I know, I was waiting for that. Ponytail, nice.
That's when I wear my hat.
Hi.
Probably.
Oh.
He used to coach.
But I think that was done before.
He used to coach here for
I think that was done before we even started because his house was on the market.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Finance Committee meeting. It is Monday, March 27th, and I will call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. My name is Amy Wiltsey, and I am the committee chair. On tonight's agenda, our first item for action is the acceptance of minutes from March 21st meeting. Do I have a motion to accept those minutes?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. David. Second by Ms. QP. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you very much. Next item, we have budget transfers. Our budget transfer number 1, I will read. Proposed transfers to adjust accounts in objects 510 and 590. Transfer request to cover transportation costs for displaced students under the McKinney-Vento Homeless Assistance Act. Total budget transfer amount is $46,875.62. Do I have a motion to accept? Thank you so much.
Second.
Thank you very much, and I will open it up for discussion. Pam, would you like to talk a little bit more about this?
Sure. I would just like to bring to the committee members' attention that we do have a significant number of homeless students this year. And we are transporting students from their current locations, which are anywhere between Norwalk, Bridgeport, Shelton, and West Haven, to our schools. And the amount before you is an estimate through the end of the year. We may have to come back again because we are anticipating a 50% payment from the school districts that they're in. We will bill them for their portion. It doesn't always come in timely, so we will do our best to deal with those costs under the $86,875. That's before you, the $46,000, I'm sorry. Don't want it to be more.
Okay, I'll open up for questions for Ms. Mangini regarding this budget transfer. Mr. Hunter?
So, in that line item, it seems like a very specific amount. Have we expended that line item already that would come out of? And this is, I know you said we might need more later on, but are we putting the cart before the horse? I mean, do we need this transfer now to continue our day-to-day activities?
Yes, we do. We are billed weekly from Durham, and this will get us through at least the next month. We have pending invoices right now that we haven't processed pending the approval on this transfer.
But the line item we're transferring into, is that line item been fully expended?
Yes, it has. There was a $35,000 original appropriation, and that has been spent.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions?
This 46,000, you said we're gonna get 50% back, or is this half of what is billed?
This amount reflects what we believe we'll need after the 50%, so it's net. So that's why I was indicating that we could be coming back to you if that's not timely, if we have trouble getting those dollars. We're pretty aggressive about it, but sometimes school districts are notorious for paying a little bit slowly. We're not, but.
Any other questions with regard to this budget transfer? Okay, we'll take a roll call vote. Mr. David?
Yes.
Mr. Proto?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mr. Henrik?
Yes.
Mrs. Bedell?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Corcoran?
Yes.
Mrs. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
And Ms. Cupie?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you very much. Budget transfer number 2 as read. Proposed transfers to cover shortage in fuel absorption account line and object 690. Budgetary savings from special education transportation, Unemployment and student helper accounts are being used to offset this increased expense. Total budget transfer amount is $160,000. Do I have a motion?
So
Ms. Carol Fabian, seconded by Ms. Cupie. Any discussion?
If I can just
Yes,
add one
please.
point. You have heard about this potential deficit since the beginning of the fiscal year. And to Mr. Hendrick's point, and it's a very good point for all of you to be aware of, we're already in deficit in this account and we can't pay our pending invoices until this budget transfer is approved. And yes, it is an estimate, which has been my estimate all along, and it will carry us through the end of the year. At least we're hopeful it'll be adequate to cover us through the end of the year.
Mrs. Duff?
If you could, just referencing the budget, the outline of the budget transfer, there's an amount that was eliminated from the student custodian salary lines. Is that because we don't have student custodians this year?
No, we have them, and we hire them only for the summer. So obviously, summer in this fiscal year has passed. We did struggle a bit with filling those positions over the summer, so there are available funds.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions with Mr. Burnham?
And the special ed transportation line, are we running on budget on that, or running ahead or behind for the year?
We actually have had savings in that account primarily as a result of the reduced number of outplacements.
It's usually an area we sometimes run behind.
This is true, but we're in pretty good shape in that line item.
Thank you.
Mr. Hendrick?
What is it that the student custodians, what do they do?
The student helpers,
Yeah.
they help throughout the summer with the full cleaning. And I know that Rich could probably tell you more about their specific duties.
They clean all the desks, all the gum. As the guys go in, strip and wax the floors. When they're done, the student helpers will put everything back,
Okay.
get the rooms all set up and all clean, wipe down. They do the windows, they do all that stuff.
Is that similar to the alternate? I know that in that budget item, it calls for, I think, alternate custodians is not part of this transfer.
No, that's different. That's a different line item, and they're the alternate driver custodians.
Correct.
So they do double duty for us. They're primarily assigned to driving duties, and when those, which hasn't been the case this year, but if ever there's time that they don't have an assignment to drive our students, then they help out with custodial duties.
If the head custodian's out, we take that driver / custodian, put them in the school for the day.
Okay.
So they fill in when head custodians are out, and if we don't have any driving, they'll typically they'll go to a high school or a middle school where there's a lot more work.
And are they as drivers, are they per diem, or are they salaried or hourly?
They're
Yeah.
full-time hourly
Yeah,
employees,
yeah.
contractual.
Yeah, they're full-time.
Are there any other questions with regard to this budget transfer? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote. Ms. Cupie?
Yes.
Ms. Carol Fabian?
Yes.
Mrs. Corcoran?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mrs. Bedell?
Yes.
Mr. Hendrick?
Yes.
Mrs. Lance?
Yes.
Mr. Proto?
Yes.
Mr. David?
Yes.
And Chair votes yes. Thank you very much. We will now move on to item B, financial reports. Ms. Mangini?
Certainly, I've provided you in your packets with the financial status report through February 28th of 2023. You will note that there was an increase to our projected balance for salaries, and I will be very candid in telling you that I anticipate that continuing to increase each month that we have vacant positions. Susan Nicholson and I are working very diligently to analyze each of those accounts and the potential savings. So you will more than likely see that increase. Also, I did note that unemployment, fortunately, and they're now billing us quarterly. It used to be monthly, so it took us a little bit more time to recognize that we were trending lower than we anticipated. So there is some savings there reflected, but as you just approved, we're going to be kind of scooping up those savings to offset some of our deficit in the gasoline absorption account. So all in all, everything else seems to be pretty much tracking on budget. We're watching the utilities carefully, but fortunately it appears that we're Perhaps electricity might be running a little bit high. We have some savings in our natural gas, so when we look at it in totality, we're okay. I don't really anticipate a whole lot of savings currently, if any, in those areas, but I think we're pretty much tracking on budget there as well. So there's really nothing else significant at this point, and our year-end balance as of February 28th, we're estimating to be slightly more than 500,000.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for Ms. Swinby?
I have a question, but it doesn't have to do with that. It's just talking budget in general and different things, and it's come up several times from members of the community to me, so I figured I'd just ask you now while we're here, just to further clarify it. I know you have spoken about it in our budget workshops, Dr. Sunday, Mrs. Wiltsey's touched on it. The Alliance grant funds. Can you just explain or clarify the purpose of the Alliance funds and how they can be used and how they cannot be used?
I think I might start off with just maybe briefly, once again, commenting about supplanting versus supplement. I think it's really important that we keep that message on the forefront, because all federal grants are very, very clear that they are to be used to supplement your educational programs, not supplant. Supplanting basically means utilizing those grant funds for ongoing activities that are already budgeted. So for example, if you have a set of computers in one of your schools and perhaps if they're broken and you want to replace them, you can't use grant monies to do that. If that's not what they were for, you could use the grant funds to buy additional computers for a classroom or a school, but not to replace existing ones that were purchased with general operating budgets. You can't take positions out of your budget that have been in your general operating budget for years, or even just 1 year. Take, for example, a reading teacher and now move them to any grant, whether it's Alliance or the title grants or the IDEA grants. That is called supplanting. I often use the example for supplementing. We provide our students with a cupcake, and the federal funds become the frosting. They become those enhancements to our programs, and that is the only way that these dollars can be used, particularly Alliance, because they do keep handy our Alliance district. It's a state statute that's very clear, and it's 10-262, U as in union. And it's very clear that the Alliance district funding is to support, not supplant, district strategies. We have to submit proposals for the use of our Alliance district funds that have to be approved by our State Department of Education. And they are very clear that, I'll read right from the statute, proposals for the use of Alliance district funding to support, not supplant, will be reviewed for the quality of the overall Alliance district plan. They mention support, not supplant, at least twice in the state statute. So it's really abundantly clear. And there is really no justification for any of us to really think that the federal or state government is just going to hand us grant funds to perhaps just supplant really our dollars in our general operating budget. They really are for enhancement, and I think we need to keep that in the forefront as we move forward with our decisions.
Thank you, Pam. Yeah, that's good. Mrs. Lance?
Piggybacking right on that, explain to me the ESSER funds then.
The ESSER funds were supposedly, one time that just kept coming in different reiterations, funding that initially we were told we had to not also supplant, but their rules kept changing, and you know, Kevin's the expert in that area because he worked very hard in trying to keep up with all of that guidance. That initially, if you might recall the CRF funds that came out initially, and they were adamant that we could only use it for X, Y, and Z. There was no supplanting, and then they changed. I think what was happening is they recognized that some, with the ESSER funds only, that some of those dollars and many of the districts were struggling just to get themselves to where they needed to be under such extraordinary circumstances. So they loosened the guidance, but it didn't mean that we could totally supplant any of our expenses in the general operating budget. What it did was provide some flexibility in that if we could in fact make the argument that it was COVID or pandemic related, we could utilize those dollars. And I will assure you honestly, Kevin and I spend hours just discussing, well, does this fit, and is this an appropriate expense to ESSER and ARP ESSER? I think the helpfulness and the reason that all of those positions were moved into ESSER and ARP ESSER was primarily because at that time we made that decision that had we not used those ESSER grants, we would have had increased class sizes at a time when our children probably needed attention more than ever. We would have not had the administrative support that was so critical with those department head positions. And there was a lot of thought, as you well know, that went into that decision prior to that, but we also reached out to the state for permission to do that. So everything is well thought out, everything is approved by the state, and we can't just blanketly take $3 million out of our operating budget and just switch it over to a grant. It's not allowed. And Kevin, if I've missed anything, please feel free to.
The only thing I'll say is, I'll echo your point. You read from the Alliance statute. One of the differences with the ESSER funds is that supplement, not supplant language is not actually in the legislation. And they left it out on purpose because they wanted us to do things like save employees that we needed to keep the district operating, provide services for students and such. So the federal government did that on purpose. Nevertheless, for both Alliance and for the ESSER grants, those are, with one possible exception, the toughest grants I have to write because the state, other grants I can just say salaries and kind of say, well, we're going to put 6 teachers in there and like that. And with the ESSER grants and the Alliance grant, they go through them item by item and they challenge them item by item. So yeah, it's not quite as strict with ESSER as it is with Alliance because of the lack of language in the federal legislation. Nevertheless, somebody at the state is going through it with a red pen and a fine-tooth comb.
Thank you. I just think it's really important that we hear that. We'll probably have to do it again next month. But I think the fact that it's out there for the public, I think people need to see it. Everybody.
Yeah.
Mr. David?
And I think there is confusion out there between ESSER and Alliance grants that we can use the Alliance grant like an ESSER grant. I think that's the confusion. By the way, no fault at this board or from Pam either. I think we've tried to communicate that out there. I think there is confusion in the community that that money can be used for that. That's my take on it.
Mr. Henry?
Yeah, so this year, it's gonna be about $2 million that circumvents the town and goes to the Board of Ed. So the town doesn't get the opportunity to offset some of its costs at $2 million. If we look down the road, and if we follow history, in about 3 years, that'll be about $5 million that circumvents the town and goes to the town. So the taxpayer is gonna have to make up our annual, say, 2.5–3% increase, plus the extra $1 million that it would typically get based on history of their ECS funding. And if you look at a town like Bridgeport, that they've been in forever, and their Alliance District funding is probably about $30 million. Are they just passing that along to the taxpayer as well, or have they found a better way to go about it? Because that's a pretty big nut to swallow, and I can't see the city of Bridgeport just passing that bill on to the taxpayer.
Well, I think you need to look at this from a couple of different perspectives. First, I can't speak to Bridgeport. I honestly do not know. I do know that districts like Bridgeport and Waterbury get a tremendous amount of grant funds, but nevertheless, the statute is clear. And if other districts choose to do things differently, I can't comment on that. I can only say that unequivocally, the state statute does not allow us to supplant operating expenditures. In addition, I think you need to look at the funding that the town gets, the education cost sharing grant, simply stays the same. So yes, the town is losing money, and they were right to fight the legislation, because I had many conversations with our town leaders, and I supported their action in that if the state had gone back to 2012 as the legislation was written, not only would the town have lost increases to excess costs, they would have had to go back to 2012 levels and could have lost $5 million. But where they are at now, based on that legislation being passed, is that they simply remain stagnant in the ECS revenue line in their budget. And I understand that it's problematic because education costs continue to increase, whereas they're not getting that increase in ECS state monies. Nevertheless, there is a reason we've become an Alliance grant, and that reason is because we are being told that we need to enhance our educational experience for our students. And I am certainly not the expert on that side of the aisle. That's certainly my colleagues here, Dr. Gata and Dr. Daniels, along with the cabinet group and all our instructional leaders. But there are needs here. And I think that we're going in a really good direction and making some progress, but that's what those funds are for, to help our students, to support them above and beyond the general operating costs that we know we have, and those aren't going away. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see how a city like Bridgeport does it, so we could maybe mirror some of their things, so we're not, because in 5 years, we're gonna be passing a $5 million bill on our taxpayers, and that's something that they're gonna have to absorb. And you know, we're creating all these positions, again, we're creating another fiscal cliff like we did with the ESSER, and we're doing nothing to address those situations. But when you see a city like Bridgeport that's getting $30 million, and they found a way to work with it, and I think that the Assistant Director of Education has a different concept to it than you do, but I think there are ways to do it that aren't so punitive to the taxpayer, but still allow us to put out a good program for our students.
I would only add to that I have very close colleagues in both Norwalk and Naugatuck, who are both Alliance districts. They will never even consider supplanting. It is illegal, it is inappropriate, it is against the state statute. I can only say that perhaps a district like Waterbury or Bridgeport, because they get so many additional dollars in grants, that they're able to perhaps cushion that impact to the city of Waterbury or Bridgeport a little bit differently. I would also probably add that I think it's important to recognize that many of those positions or a few of the positions that we have since added to Alliance are solely for that purpose of getting us to where we need to be. And once that occurs, those positions in theory really should be able to go away, because our general operating budget positions will be able to take it from there. We need this opportunity to improve, and that's what we're doing. And we have an incredible crew, just many of whom are sitting here this evening, who are working really hard to make certain that happens.
Thank you, Mrs.
Hopefully after this too, though, we can, as advocates, push the legislature to fully fund our ECS funding, because I know Stratford's been short-sighted for at least the 20 years I've been around. So that's part of our problem as well, is the lack of state funding that's been promised to us. Thank you.
Pam, thank you very much for bringing the comparison to town. We can't compare with the city of Bridgeport or the city of Waterbury and what they receive, especially who they serve. So thank you, Mrs. Corcoran.
Just briefly like to add that if we won't be talking about a cliff if we're putting supplementary positions in that grant. If we are putting positions from our operating budget into our grant, like we did with ESSER, then we will be looking at a cliff one day down the road when hopefully we graduate from the Alliance program. So I would hope that we would keep everything funded by Alliance monies as supplementary for that reason, if amongst many other reasons to boot.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your response. Yes.
So I can send everybody the link to Bridgeport's budget presentation, and they aren't making it work, I can tell you that. As much as they're getting in state funding and grants, their average per pupil is extremely low. They're the largest district in the state, it's a struggle for them. They get very little contribution from the from the town side. It's a very difficult position for them. So I can send that video to everybody here. I just want to bring up a point because, you know, before I joined the board and just being a parent in the district and watching year after year where programs get cut and then, okay, a budget is submitted to the town, and if you're only funding to a contract obligation, you're not fixing the issues that were caused, right? Like you're not adding back programs, you're not growing, you're not creating any opportunity for improvement. So staying at, let's just meet the contractual agreement, obligation, it's not helping us. Like so much has been cut over the years. We need to really invest in our district. We really, really need to like take stock of this and look at the benefit of a strong school system overall to the community. So I just wanted to, throw that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coopy. Mrs. Bedell?
Just in response to Ms. Kubi, nobody disagrees with that. We need to invest, but we also need to re-engineer what we have and make it work for what is now, because them just throwing more money at it is not going to make it work. We have to take what we have and redo the resources, move the resources around, rearrange the resources as we have them, and then add the new.
So that has to come with a transition. You can't just all of a sudden say, stop here, I'm funding to,
Of course not.
This and fix everything, and then I'll, start showing me improvement, and then I'll start to fund you. That, it doesn't work like that.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that those ideas need to happen as the additions are happening as well.
Yes, but no funding increase is really happening if you're only meeting the contractual obligation.
But if you're
really
re-engineering the
tying their
resources,
hands.
the more funding doesn't need to happen.
I have a question to that. Re-engineering the resources doesn't eliminate resources though, so that's a flat fund.
Not necessarily.
Then we would have to use a different word than re-engineer.
We could.
Re-engineering sounds like we're keeping it status quo, and status quo doesn't seem to be working.
Well, in the construction business, re-engineering doesn't mean that.
This is
This
a
is a
construction
school.
business.
It
Okay,
is.
thank you very much for the questions. Are there any other questions with regard to Ms. Mangini's presentation? Okay, thank you. Dr. Clemmie, grants update, please.
Good evening. You have the report in your packet for the month ending February 28th, 2023. We are just shy, and I mean just shy, of $24 million in grant funds being managed at this time. We're coming out of the slow period. We only had one addition this month, which was Title IV. Finally came through, and I put it on the sheet. Before anybody asks, I've had no news of the HVAC grant. Apparently it's still sitting in the commissioner's office. And we have 6 things in progress, though. Like I said, we're coming out of the doldrums now. So we have the school readiness grant, the adult education grant, the school security grant, a mental health staffing grant, IDEA and IDA preschool, all under preparation right now. Most of those due in early to mid-April.
Wonderful. Are there any questions for Dr. Clemmie? Mr. Clemmie?
Dr. Clemmie, there are a number of, not a number, I should say, there are a few whose end dates have passed. Are we still getting money in those? And if not, why are we continuing to carry them on the record?
So this record, at least as long as I've been here, has been all the grants available during the fiscal year. So even though the end date is there, I haven't removed them because we had funds to spend in this fiscal year.
So in addition to this, the way you do this, would you be kind enough to run the report a second way as well and sort by end date? So we can see all the ones that are going to go away on June 30th
We can do that.
as opposed to searching for them?
In fact, I'll just submit one report and I'll change it so that it reads that way.
I don't know if you listed them in order for any particular reason under your grant title, as opposed to just an end date.
Other than being loosely grouped like titles and IDEAs and ESSERs, no, there's no particular organization to it.
Are you all set, Mr. Clemmie?
Yep, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions for Dr. Clemmie? Mrs. Carol Fabian?
2 questions. One I had asked a while back, a couple months ago, about the community development block grant.
Mhm.
the Franklin School playground.
Mm-hmm.
Where are we with that?
Well, we have encumbered those funds and we have a purchase order out to the vendor. The vendor has ordered the playground equipment to be manufactured, the swing sets and all. That has to go in first before we can redo the surface so that we're not digging up the surface then when the swing set comes in. And we are told that I think it's around Atlanta in Georgia maybe, that the Georgia factory that's producing that swing set plans to ship them around April 6th.
Thank you for that update.
You're welcome.
And then, one other question was about the Stop School Violence, who's Department of Justice, Bureau of Justice Assistance. I don't know if you want to answer or if it's Dr. Daniels kind of question, because I know she's involved with that. I just wanted to kind of know where we were at with that, like with this program, and have we hired the necessary staff to help begin this?
So yes, we have. We just in the past couple of weeks hired the last staff member. It took a while to find some of the staff. We've been reworking the salaries budget a little bit to accommodate what we needed to do in order to get the three right people in the situation. But yes, all of the staff have been hired. Students have been referred to the program, and the staff is working with that first cohort of students.
And that's just for secondary students, right? Middle
Correct.
school, high school?
Correct.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions for Dr. Fleming? Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Fleming. We will move on to Ms. Borges for a special education PPS report.
He's telling me I need to stand up because he can't see me. Thank you for your transfers. We're now tracking on budget. As you guys can see, I think we will end up around 1,305 students with exceptionalities by the end of the year. We're seeing that steady increase that I told you would see, so we're up 11 students from last month. And we're just, continuing to work on making sure we are appropriately servicing each of our students, but we should be all set, and each of the budget lines, thanks to your transfers, are tracking on budget now.
Are there any questions for Ms. Borges? Thank you so much.
Great.
And food services report, Mrs. Mangini?
Yes, our food service program continues to remain healthy. We do have a few unpaid charges from when we were back to charging for regular meals in January and February, and we're working with the schools to collect on those. I think there has been some confusion with our families, which is understandable, from no, you don't pay, yes, you do, no, you don't. So we are actually reaching out to those families to work on that. But we're in really good shape. For the first time in probably a decade, we're actually purchasing some new equipment, which has been long overdue, and that was through a process that the state required us to provide a spend down plan. So we looked at the equipment, the ages, and we're starting with the oldest, although a few things broke down in between. So we had to kind of reprioritize, but we're doing very well.
Wonderful. Does anyone have any questions with regard to the food services report? Okay. Thank you very much, Mrs. Mangini. And enrollment registration status, please.
Actually, your enrollment report, as I'm sure you've noticed, is reflective of an increase in students over last month of about 30, and mostly at the elementary level. And to Heather's point, she had indicated last month that she was anticipating an increase in students with exceptionalities, and I think we just tend to see this kind of an increase. I shared once before that when I arrived in Stratford, this was something that was very new to me. The registrations just never seemed to stop. The other districts that I've had experience in had them just at certain times of the year, and we seem to have them on an ongoing basis. So it just makes forces us to be on top of our numbers a little bit more than perhaps I had to be concerned in the past. But it's a good exercise for us as well. And I will tell you that our kindergarten registration continues to strive. We are just keeping very busy in that area. I don't have numbers for you yet, and it is a little bit early, even though registration opened about a month ago. We get perhaps a bit of an influx initially, and then it slows down, and then it will pick up again, particularly early summer. But as soon as we have some firm numbers, we'll share them with you.
Mrs. Lynn?
One quick question. I'm looking at the outplacements, and it's, for seniors, 12th grade, it's 31. Are there some students that we let them finish, Pam, Heather, to finish the program instead of bringing them back at that stage of the game, because the other group looks so much lower?
She's that number.
Oh, wait a minute.
That's what I'm talking to.
Mr. David?
I think, oh, there she, Heather's there. Heather, you're back. Good.
Heather.
I was gonna try to help with that.
My question was that, for outplacements, the number is quite large compared to the other grades, and I appreciate everything your department has done to bring students back, to service them right here in Stratford. Is that number so high because they were in the program and we thought it'd be better to keep them there for the last year, or can you explain that high number?
For seniors. For seniors.
Heather, she's talking about the 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. That's why the numbers, you'll look at it.
21, 22. No, I'm
Yeah.
not. No, I'm not.
You're talking about the seniors till age 22.
Seniors to age 22, that's where they're listed.
That's right.
Oh, okay, thank you.
That's why I was trying to, I didn't want to jump on that. But
That's why it's
That's why
larger,
it's
it's more
higher.
than one.
Thank
I've
you.
asked that.
Have you said that before?
That's okay.
Does anyone else have any other questions with regard? Yes, Ms. King?
Maybe similar to the explanation that you did earlier, Pam, talk about how budget changes when we have a reduction in enrollment versus, or an increase in enrollment, because an increase of 11 students doesn't mean our costs go up 11 times, 19 plus thousand, right? Or a reduction of 11 children does not mean our expenses go down the equivalent, because some children it's costing over 150,000 to educate. Not every child is being educated at that one average, right?
I think that's really important, and most people just simply don't understand that. I even have conversations with my family sometimes in their own towns where we've had 5 kids move out. That should be $100,000 savings. It unfortunately doesn't work that way, particularly when you're looking at 13 schools and the number of students that we have here, close to 7,000. I think what ends up happening is people have to understand, and this is a perfect segue, because when I compare month to month, I write myself little notes, and when I indicated that most of the increases in elementary, I'll bring to your attention, for example, Franklin received 3 more students. Now, 3 more students is not going to save us, let's just use $20,000 per student. It's not going to save us $60,000, because chances are 1 student's going into the 4th grade class, 1 into a 2nd, 1 into a 1st grade. So obviously, we have those set costs, and those students that move in will just fit accordingly. The problem could come in when perhaps we just can't absorb another child in a particular grade in a particular school, then we look to other schools. But it takes a significant increase in enrollment in one level or one grade for there to be added cost. And alternately, it takes that same significant number. We'd have to have 20 5th grade students move out of Second Hill Lane. Then yes, we would reduce by a teacher more than likely, and we would have some savings. But not the per pupil cost savings, because of course that includes the cost of running the building, the cost of the administrators, the cost of the admin center. So it's not dollar to dollar, and we will seldom see any true reductions based on these kinds of enrollments. Even if you have 100 to 150 additional students, chances are you are not going to see a significant or any increase or decrease, simply because they have to all be in the same school in the same grades. Hope that helps.
So to that point, Pam, I assume we're keeping a close eye on Nichols 2nd and 6th and Whitney 6th. They all seem to be like that teeter-tottering for another classroom.
Yes, and I will not take full credit for that. I have a wonderful secretary in Susan Hughes who's always looking at these numbers, and when we get new registrations, we will discuss them, we'll review them, and if we can't absorb them in their home school, then we need to look where else we can provide them an educational experience, but there's so many things we have to then take into consideration, including transportation, because if the district has to move that child, then we do have to provide the transportation and make certain that we can get a bus routed. So there's all kinds of pieces that go into that, but to your point, we are really paying attention, particularly those elementary schools that are kind of bursting at the moment.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions with regard to enrollment and registration status?
Yeah, on Second Hill Lane, the last 4 lines, I'm not sure which page it is, but
Oh,
the
yeah,
enrollment
individual.
totals.
Okay, sorry, it was on the wrong page, yeah.
So I'm guessing each of the first 4 are just classrooms, and then you have a line with, I'm guessing it's the dual language, not sure, but you have no 6th grade in the 5th line.
Yeah, what you have there are the regular classrooms and then 2 classrooms on each grade, except for 6 that are dual language. And then you have the ABA classes in the italicized numbers.
So the last 2 non-italicized numbers are the dual language?
Yes,
Okay.
for kindergarten through 5th.
Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, I will accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Madam Chair.
Second. Thank you so much. The meeting is adjourned at 7:10 p.m.
I don't know.
The theory never goes away.